Good morning, Dan Lowry from Go Team Training here. Of late we've been getting a lot of questions about nutrition, and it seems to be an area that is confusing a lot of people. So I wanted to put together this little reference and resource so that you could all have a far better understanding of how to master this stuff. And it really is crucial that we, I suppose, see it for the simple thing that it needs to be and take a lot of the guesswork out of it. And I think that by nature we do make it a lot more complicated than what it needs to be. And part of this is the fault of pop culture and a lot of the diets and diet fads that are going around. So during this video I want to I suppose streamline it a little bit for you and simplify. And one of the really important things to sort of keep in mind here is as I talk about often, you won't outrun a bad diet. It doesn't matter if you go from training 0 times to training 6 times a week with us or even more. If your nutritional practices are suboptimal and you're still doing stuff away from training that doesn't really support this, you're going to find it hard to get results. There are exceptions. Some people can train hard and then go and eat shit and drink on the weekends and do all the bad stuff and still make progress, but for most women this simply won't be the case. So during this video, this display, I'm going to take you through the reasons why we put on body fat, to learn the best strategy for losing body fat, to understand the virtues of different diets and methodologies, and to develop a plan so you can leave this video with a bit of a clear path of action moving forward. And like I said, if you marry up nutrition with your training, your results are going to be so much better. Okay, so before we get started, knowing your somatotype is a really important thing. So somatotypes are a term that we use to describe the natural inclination that your body has. So some people, let's start on the left first. So the ectomorph. Ectomorphs are people who are naturally thin. So they're people that really struggle to put weight on. They struggle to put muscle on, they struggle to put body fat on. And this body type is someone who, despite all their efforts, they're really going to struggle to change a lot. In my experience, this person can eat pretty much whatever they want, and there's not a lot of change that happens. Now, the reason I cover this is if you are not an ectomorph, it's really important to understand that you're going to have to do a lot more to lose weight. Particularly if you are an endomorph, so to the far right hand of the screen, this is somebody who tends to be shorter, a bit stockier, put on body fat really easy. Walk past the bakery, have a look at the pies in the windows, and you'll put on 3 kilos sort of body makeup. Now, cruel as it is, you need to accept this if this is you, and know that your training is going to have to be backed up with really good nutrition. In the middle, the somatotype we have here is the mesomorph. So this is somebody that puts on muscle really easy, and we all know these people. They just, rather than walk past the bakery and put on 3 kilos of body fat when they look in the window, they'll walk past the gym and they'll put on 3 kilos of muscle. So these people certainly have it easier, and when they go into activities like lifting weights or training seriously, they tend to do really well in all kinds of athletic pursuits, especially ones that are power orientated. Okay, so the key with any success in the whole world of fitness is strategy. You have to have a plan. If you're looking to get stronger, you have to have a good strength training program. If you're looking to get leaner, you have to have a good plan or strategy for doing that. And it's often said that a bad plan followed 100% will get you better results than a really good plan followed 90%. And this is true. You have to know what you're doing, and you have to know what you're going to do each day rather than leaving it to chance. So when we fail at something due to having a poor strategy, we start to tell ourselves all kinds of stories. And I see this all the time. People start their training and they're all keen and they're enthusiastic. And after the first 2 to 3 weeks, their enthusiasm starts to shift, and they start to lose that initial spark that they had when they started with their training, and they start falling back into old habits. And as soon as you, for most people, as soon as they don't see those results they were expecting to see really easily, they tend to lose motivation. You stop seeing them at training as much. They start telling themselves the stories about, oh, I never do well at this stuff. I've just got bad genetics. It's too hard. My thyroid function must be really crap. My hormones must be out of whack. That's why I never lose weight. And they tell themselves all these stories. But the reality is that, one, they haven't done it for long enough. And two, they haven't put good training together with good nutrition for a long enough period of time. And this is really frustrating to watch because, as an educated observer, I can see everything that's going on. I know, well, this person's only been training for 2 to 3 weeks. They haven't got their nutrition right, and if they do the two together and they get it right for long enough, they will see change. They just need to have that faith and that understanding of how to do it. So with this, one of the other things that I often see looking through the food entries on MyFitnessPal, and we have had a lot of members be really good with putting their details in, is you start to see patterns and behaviours that are incongruent with words. So quite often, over the years I've had clients say to me, oh, I'm not losing any weight, I don't know what I'm doing wrong, I'm eating really well, I'm training well, the whole story. And so I get them to put their food diaries in on MyFitnessPal, which we'll talk a little bit about later in this video. And when I review what's happening, it's just a carb fest. And there's a lot more indiscriminate eating of carbohydrate and calories that really give you nothing from a nutritional standpoint that are leading to this lack of results. So the things that'll really stack the weight on you are processed foods, excess carbohydrate. So if you're getting up in the morning and eating cereal first thing, and then throughout the day you're snacking on more carbohydrates, and you're having muffins and lots of bread and pasta and all these things, you're loading your body up essentially with sugar. So when we break down carbohydrates, it gets broken down into sugar. That's a very simplified explanation of it. But this is what essentially has our society in the state it is. Too much carbohydrate will certainly lead to weight gain easier than other macronutrients. So if you're eating more protein or overeating on protein, there tends to be far less of a correlation to weight gain. And it's the same with fat. If you're eating more fat, you tend to be satisfied for longer, and there's once again far less correlation to weight gain. The carbohydrate itself is not evil. It's just a matter of understanding where to get it from, the best sources and how much we need. Now, the other big things here are alcohol and sugar. Eating a chocolate bar or a confectionery-based chocolate bar is very different to eating some Lindt chocolate, some 85% chocolate. The amount of sugar that you're cumulatively going to get over a long period of time makes a big difference. And then, as I mentioned there, alcohol is a big one for females. So if you're drinking on a regular basis, if it's daily or even just binge drinking on weekends, what this does to stop you losing weight is just phenomenal. And it seems to be that women are affected by alcohol far more than men. The effect that alcohol has on hormones and holding weight around the hips and the abdominals, it's really quite profound. So if you're serious about losing weight, I'd strongly recommend that you cut back on alcohol significantly. And when you do drink, try to drink in a way that has less of an effect on blood sugar. So rather than white wine, red wine, and really just manage quantity. So some of the other factors that influence putting on body fat: lack of activity and ineffective training programs. So we're going to talk a little bit later in this video about ineffective training programs and what that means. Calorie surplus, if you're training 6 days a week and each day, you know, that means that you're sort of burning 2,000 calories total for the day, but you're taking in 2,500 calories, well, you're going to struggle to lose weight if you're doing that, because you are in a calorie surplus, and the surplus always has to be stored, just like a bank account. If your bank account is in surplus, the amount of money in it will increase. It's the same with calories. If your body has too many calories, you will store those as body fat or muscle, depending on your makeup. Lack of insulin sensitivity, so this ties back into carbohydrate. If you have poor insulin sensitivity, this is essentially what type 2 diabetes is. It means that you need to produce more insulin. Insulin is a storage hormone, and if you're producing more insulin, you're going to do more storing. So cutting down on carbohydrate and managing your intake of carbohydrate will certainly help with that. Okay, so the people that we've had great success with at GTT in helping them change their body and lose weight, they've just learnt the basics and then become consistent with that. And that's really all it is. It doesn't need to be hard. You know, the basics are quite simple. Where people go wrong is they don't learn the basics first. You know, it's all too complicated, so they don't change their behavior. And then they don't put it into play, or they learn the basics, but then they just go back to old habits, because old habits do die hard, and setting a new habit and new behavior does take a little bit of work. So why do we fail? To actually lose weight, we must create an alignment of synergistic events. So as I've mentioned earlier, it's not just about training, or it's not just about diet, it's about getting the two together. So most people struggle to do this. They do not understand which factors need to be addressed to align for an optimal outcome. Today we're going to give you those tools and show you how to put them together. So other times people are making really good progress, and we see this quite a bit too. You know, they might be losing good body fat, putting on muscle, but they jump programs before they give it a chance to really work. So measuring is crucial, and I can't tell you, I mean, on average I'd say 90% of the people that come through our doors, within the first 6 weeks, they've lost anywhere between 2 to 5 kilos of body fat, and then they've put on a similar amount of muscle. So the scale weight really doesn't show much change, and this is what we call recomposition. So they're burning body fat, putting on muscle, and scale weight is of negligible change during that process. So someone sees that, they're checking the scales every day, they're not changing, but their body is changing, and then they go, oh, this isn't working, it's not worth it, it's not worth the pain I'm going through, it's not worth all the change. And then they either stop training or they go and try something else. But the thing is, they were making change. All they need to do is stick at it. And this is why we recommend that you do regular skin fold assessments if you're trying to lose weight, because it keeps you on track, and it justifies to you, and it'll help your motivation with continuing on the path you're on when you see that there is progress being made. Many others do really well with their training, but their body might not necessarily change much because they haven't made the change with the diet. You know, they're still drinking too much alcohol, or it's, you know, when we look at their food diets, at carb fest, they're eating too much carbohydrate. So making that change with the diet to align with the training is critical. So as I just mentioned, measuring progress is crucial. Get in for a skin fold assessment every 4 to 6 weeks. This is what's going to keep you on track. You're going to see, okay, is this working? Number one. It also gives me the ability to sort of look at it, and if there's not much change, you know, we can then look at your macros and your calorie intake and adjust some of those things. But it's like a navigation check. It's like, you know, if you're on a long trip in the car and you're following a map or a GPS, it's like stopping and just checking where you are and seeing if you need to recalibrate or change directions a little bit. So this is a good little case history of a girl that trained with us when we very first opened. She started at 62 kilos on the scales. over time she lost nearly 3 kilos on the scale weight. But if we look at kilograms of body fat, her kilograms of body fat went down by over 4 kilos, and she put on over 2 kilos of muscle. So as she went here, you can see, from the first test to the second test, she went from 62 to 62.2 kilos down to 62. So she lost 200 grams on the scales, but she had lost nearly 4 kilos of fat and put on nearly 4 kilos of muscle. Now, she fluctuated a little bit after that, but it just shows that first test result there, how much she'd changed without her scale weight being any different. Okay, so there's a number of important elements that we need to be addressed and understood for best results, and you've probably heard of some of these terms before. So calories in versus calories out. If it fits your macros, so macros is short for macronutrients, and the 3 macronutrients we have are protein, carbohydrate, and fat. So clean eating / paleo is the other term that we're going to cover. Now, calories in to calories out is this simple. Each day your body will burn through a certain amount of calories without you doing anything. So just waking up, using your brain, basic stuff. And for most females that will be anywhere between about 1100 and 1800 calories per day, depending on your weight. And essentially, if you add some exercise in there, or even if you don't, if you consume less calories than that, you're going to lose weight. So it's very simple. Now we can optimize that and upregulate that by adding some training in, and we can create a really good deficit. And you see here the example on the screen. We've got calories used, 2,000, and then calories consumed, it's a little bit above 1,500. So the space in between there is the calorie deficit. Now the body will draw upon stored body fat to essentially run your metabolic process, or your normal physiological process, when there is a deficit. And the main thing that it's providing energy for is brain function. So when your brain runs purely on carbohydrate or glucose, as it is when it's broken down in the body. So if you're not giving the body enough energy in the form of food, it will draw on that from stored body fat. Or if there is a calorie deficit and you exercise, your body will fuel that exercise by breaking down stored energy, body fat. So body fat is a bit like petrol in the petrol tank of your car. And if you create that deficit, it means that you're going to be tapping into more of that fuel from the tank. So to work out your basal metabolic rate, there are some calculations here. Now, you don't need to worry about going through this. If you simply download the app MyFitnessPal and work out your basal metabolic rate. Now, with that, it's going to ask you how much you exercise, blah, blah, blah. Just put in nil, just put in that you don't exercise. All we want is that basal metabolic rate, so what your body burns through if you do nothing. Okay, so 1 kilogram of fat is 7,700 calories of stored energy. So when we understand that, it starts to give us the big picture that we've got to create a good calorie deficit over a long period of time to actually lose a lot of weight. And this is where it's important to have realistic expectations. You're not gonna jump into a new exercise program and do one of these these magazine makeovers in the next 8 weeks. If you've got a lot of weight to lose, you need to be realistic and not look at exercise and diet as a means to an end. You need to look at it as a lifestyle change. And this stuff is important. The heavier you are and the more overweight you are, the more predisposed you are to chronic disease. Diabetes, heart disease, cancer, all the bad things. Direct correlation to body fat and carrying excess body fat. So you need to be creating this calorie deficit consistently to be burning through this 1 kilo of fat. Every 1 kilo of fat is 7,700 calories. Now, weight loss is rarely a linear event, so if you create 7,700 calories worth of deficit per week, it doesn't mean you're going to lose 1 kilo of body fat. It tends to be far less predictable than that. There's a whole heap of other metabolic functions at play and variables at play. And it's these things that tend to, influence the outcome. So what we do know is that if you do have that deficit and you do eat good food and you do exercise, there will be weight loss. We just want to make sure that we don't starve. So you'll see the final point on that slide there is going below 1,200 calories per day can cause metabolic damage within 5 to 7 days. So metabolic damage is a slowing of your metabolism. Now there's a couple of ways that we can avoid this. So keeping the deficit smaller, so about 10%. So if your basal metabolic rate was 2,000, having a deficit of about 200 is good. It means that you're not going to create metabolic damage. The longer and slower we can achieve your weight loss, the more likely it is to be permanent. So we want to have a long-term approach and just sort of say, okay, I've decided that I want to be in control of my body composition, I want to be in control of my weight. I'm committing to this for life, I'm committing to exercise for life, I'm committing to eating well for life. This is going to be part of who I am, and I'm going to sort of let go of the outcomes a little bit. I'm just going to follow the plan, and if you do that, you're going to have really good success over the long time, and it doesn't create this anxiety then about having to get there in the next 8 weeks, 12 weeks, whatever it is. It's just settling into the change routine for lifetime. So the eat less, move more approach to weight loss is to a certain degree fraught with danger. In the long term, it's rarely sustainable and can lead to serious health problems, chronic fatigue, metabolic syndrome, poor energy. You want to be eating enough that you can get through the day, and you want to be eating the right foods that energize you, and you want that calorie deficit just to be small and something maintainable. There's no point training like a boss every day, trying to survive on 1,000 calories and thinking that you're going to smash this out in no time. It's unhealthy. It's going to lead to you falling off the wagon. You need to master the basics of this and do it in a way that's sustainable. Otherwise, you will not make it. Okay, so understanding macronutrients: proteins, fats, carbohydrates. Most foods, or all foods, will fall into mainly one of these categories. So what the science shows us is the two most important things for weight loss are macros, or the balance of where you get your calories from, and also total calories, so calories in to calories out. So measuring macronutrients is an important technique used for optimizing body composition. It's the practice of allocating a certain amount of energy from each of the three categories. Now, one of the other good things about macronutrients and understanding macronutrients and getting them right is it makes it easier to, I suppose, get by on a calorie deficit. Some people find it difficult being on a deficit because they feel like they're hungry. Now, if you aim for a calorie deficit with disregard to where your calories are coming from, and you're doing too much of your calories in carbohydrates, you will find it really hard because you'll be hungry. Whereas if you're focusing on meals that are more orientated towards protein and fats, you'll find it quite easy. So one of my favorite analogies to help people with this stuff is to eat a diet that's 80% meat and 3 veg. So if you go the meat and 3 veg approach, so if you have some chicken thigh with some steamed broccoli, zucchini, and a little bit of sweet potato, you've created yourself a meal which is high in protein and fats, low in carbohydrate, especially if you keep the sweet potato to a minimum. Or let's just say you had chicken thigh with zucchini and broccoli. Now, the fiber content is high and the protein content is high. You're getting the fiber from the vegetables and the protein from the meat. Now, what this will do is it will help you feel satisfied for longer. It will help you go longer between meals, and as a byproduct, it will keep your total calorie intake down. Coincidentally, this is the same way that bodybuilders eat as they're leading into a competition. They'll eat protein and they'll eat fiber. And it just makes it easier to cut your calories and still have energy and still feel good and still get nourished without this excess calorie buildup. And this is the difference. You know, if you're eating most of your meals like this, you'll progress very well. Okay, so IIFYM, I talked about this a little bit earlier. If it fits your macros, this is otherwise known as flexible dieting. And this is an important part of the picture too. So it's the practice of working in your naughty stuff, you know, the foods you like to have, your wine, your chocolate, and still get results. So the key is just to know your numbers. So if you know that you can have 1,800 calories a day because you're burning 2,000, you can work in some of this other stuff. If you're a fiend for sugar and you like to have lollies, fine, have them, but just don't go over your 1,800 calories a day. Still try to have lots of protein, but just factor this in, preferably somewhere close to your training, and you'll still make progress. We find that this works a whole lot better than denying yourself. So when people go on these diets and they can't eat this or they can't eat that, and there's lots of rules, their adherence is less likely to last for a long time. So having some flexibility there and working these things into your diet, if that's what you need to do, then this is how you do it. Okay, clean eating is essentially the opposite of flexible dieting. So some people find that they do really well with stringent rules of not being able to eat certain things. Now this is up to you. You need to match your approach with your personality, but the whole paleo movement has become, you know, pretty big now, and whilst a lot of it is pseudoscience, and you know, they'll teach you that carbohydrates are going to kill you and blah blah blah, for the most part it is a good approach because it gets us focusing on real food. The more real food you eat as opposed to processed foods, the better you'll do. You get more nutrition from them, there's not as much toxicity, there's less processing, and it means that, you know, per gram of food consumed, you get a far more nutrition. One of the things that I think works really well is, you know, if 80% of the time you're following it like a paleo or clean eating approach, and then the other 20% of the time you can eat out at a restaurant or whatever, you'll do pretty well. And just know your numbers. If you're landing within your numbers, you'll find it pretty easy to do so eating these good foods. So, putting it all together, and this is where people get confused. I want to try and explain now how you can do this without it being overly complicated. Okay, so in coming up with a plan for effective and lasting weight loss, we must ensure that it's sustainable indefinitely. And this is a big part of the mindset side of it that I talked about. Your diet has to be a permanent lifestyle change. So you need to find a way of doing this that is permanent. And this means clearing all the shit out of your cupboards and fridge. If it is in the house, you will eat it. If you have a family that you shop for, this needs to be a change for your whole family. Stop buying them the soft drinks, stop buying the fruit juices, stop buying all these empty foods that are full of sugar and carbohydrate, and start replacing it with nourishing foods. It can be done. We do it in our household. We've got an 11-year-old boy here. If we can do it, you can do it. It just means changing your mindset and your approach. So you need to find a way of doing it that doesn't mean you're coming in and out of a diet. You know, good for 2 days, bad for 2 days. It needs to be a permanent change. You need to be prepared, and it needs to be sustainable. Now, I can tell you it's really not that hard. Each day, you do a slow cook up. So you slow cook overnight, you slow cook meat. That is the meat for the next day. You steam your veggies to go with it. You know, you have some brown rice cooked up, and then you have healthy snacks, fruit and vegetables. It's really not that hard. And when you're eating like this, you'll find that you get from meal to meal pretty easily without needing to snack a lot. If you do need to snack, you know, you can have a Quest bar, which is a high protein bar. You can have some nuts, you can have some fruit, you can have some cheese, you can have some meat. You know, ham and cheese is a good option, turkey and cheese. Whatever it is, you just need to be prepared. You need to also understand that this is not something you do for a little while, it's something you do forever. And doing this more often than not will mean that when you go out for dinner to a restaurant, you want to have some pasta or you want to have some pizza or something like that, on the odd occasion, it's not going to kill you. It's not going to ruin your progress. Progress is made in the day-to-day. It is made in meal to meal, and it's made by making long-term change. Now, it must be supportive of good health, both physically and emotionally. So it's no good going through your day starving, scouring the fridge and the cupboard for options that aren't there. You have to plan this, and you have to have the foods there so you don't get hungry and lose the plot and eat something bad. Okay, so determine your total calorie intake relative to your goals. So using MyFitnessPal, if you haven't done it already, pause the video now and find out what your base metabolic rate is. Now, like I said, it's going to be anywhere between 11 and 1800 calories if you're a female. So once you have that, you then can add 200 to 300 calories on training days. 200 is better. So if your BMR is 1500, on a training day you can have 1700 calories. Now, there's another setting on MyFitnessPal where there's a little pie chart, and if you click on that, it will show you a breakdown of where your calories are coming from. So once you've entered in a day's worth of food, you want 40% of those to have come from protein, 30 from carbs, 30 from fats. This takes a little bit of mucking around to get right. What we find is as people get their protein up, their fat goes up as well. Now, do not worry if this is the case, because if it is at the expense of carbohydrate, you'll get very good results. And you're not going to get fat from having too high a fat intake. That is not the issue. Okay, you're going to get fat from having too many total calories and too many carbs. So we want to control carbohydrate intake. We're not talking about low carb intake. We're talking about controlled. And focus on getting more energy from protein and fats. That will mean that you are satisfied for longer between meals and you will tend to do better. Now, if 80% of your total food is from a paleo-ish approach, the other 20%, it won't matter too much. Okay, so a couple of screenshots here from MyFitnessPal. So this is the pie chart that I was talking about, and as you can see on this one, they're getting 50% of their calories from carbs and 21% from protein. Now, this is a recipe for disaster, this example here. They'd be hungry all the time. The more carbohydrate you eat, the hungrier you're going to feel. You need some is fine, but you don't want to be having 50% of your total calories from carbohydrate. And you'll see on the screenshot here, the app will give you a little bit of a count of how many calories you've got left in the day. So it helps you manage your intake. Okay, this is another good little slide. It shows you a weekly graph. So you'll see there's been a couple of days that they've gone over on their calories. Now that's not going to be a huge drama. There's more days that are under than over. So this is a good way of sort of reviewing your week, seeing how you went, and you'll pretty quickly get a good feel. After doing this for a week, you get a feel for how much you can eat, and your body will also adjust. Your body typically adjusts to how much you're eating. You'll stop feeling hungry at the same amount, and you'll just get used to it. Okay, here's another screenshot just showing some of the inputs for each meal. Okay, putting it all together. Dial in your basal metabolic rate, plus 200 to 300 calories on training days. If it's a non-training day, just eat your BMR. So if your BMR is 1500, have 1500 calories. Carbohydrates should orbit around your workout. So you see our little picture here of our satellite in orbit. If you can have your carbs pre and post workout, your body will use them more efficiently. When we train, we change the way that our body uses nutrition. And when we lift weights or we do something high intensity, like on our lactic days, your body will shuttle circulating glucose, which is the end result of carbohydrate, into the muscle. It will also help you with the recovery and performance. So getting this carbohydrate intake around your training is a really good way to do it, and that might be in the form of having some porridge before or after training, or having some carbohydrate in a smoothie, or whatever it may be. Some yogurt and berries, but having it around your training is very important. The remainder of your meal should have more of a protein and fiber objective. So if we look at the paleo pyramid over here, the base level is lean meat and fish. So that's our protein. Above that, we have veggies and fruit. That is our fiber-based carbohydrate. Now, when we have the fiber, it negates the effect of the carbs. It's empty carbs without fiber that are the problem. Up the top, we have nuts and berries. So they're our smaller snack. Paleo doesn't usually allow for dairy, but quality dairy is fine. So good cheeses, good milk, good yogurt. These are all healthy, nutritious foods. Make sure they fit into your numbers and you'll be fine. This is essentially the approach for improving the way your body looks and feels in one slide. If you get this stuff right, your goals will happen very easily and effortlessly. So eating clean for 80% of your calories, the Paleo Method is a good blanket approach for achieving this. Eat the naughty stuff, the other 20%, if you absolutely feel the need. You don't have to, but if you have an emotional connection to food, have some dark chocolate, have a glass of wine. Just make sure you've hit your numbers and it won't make a big difference. Okay, things that do not work for changing your body. Bar classes. If any of you are doing barcode or wasting money on that, stop it. It does not work. The claims that it will create long, lean muscle are just totally unfounded. We have this wonderful discipline in the world called science, and sports science is a big part of that. And what this science shows us is that you need to be lifting a heavier weight to change your body. It will not make you bulky, it will not make you big, but one thing that does not work is lifting really, really light weights. I mean, if you hold your phone up to your face or you hold a book up long enough, your arms will get sore. It does not mean it's changing your body. Barcode and bar classes are exactly the same. Yoga will not change your body. Yoga has many benefits. It's great for stretching, it's great for de-stressing, but it will not change your body. Even if you're in a hot room sweating, it just doesn't influence your metabolism enough to make any significant change. And the other thing which doesn't work is sitting on a bike in the gym going it alone at low intensity, which you will work at. Once again, intensity breeds results, and you need to be exercising at a decent intensity. So with exercise, you need to do a number of things. So an effective approach to weight loss and improving body composition should be objective and scientifically validated. It should also incorporate all the following elements: resistance training, which we do on our strength days; lactic acid, which we get on our cardio and lactic days; and calories burned, which we get through all 3 days. So resistance training and accumulating time under tension. So you'll notice when we train, we talk a lot about using a slow down phase. What this does is it stimulates these little cells called glucose transporting cells, and there's 13 different ones, and it's mainly type 3 and 4. And you'll see here in the picture, they're like a little sponge, and they come up to the surface of the muscle. And what they do is they start to draw in circulating glucose. And this is why somebody with muscle mass and active muscle will use nutrients in the diet far differently to someone who does not train. When you're lifting weights, your muscles become like sponges, and you start sponging up glucose and carbohydrate instead of storing it in body fat. And this is all part of the remodeling process. The body is trying to repair the damage that you're doing when you're lifting those weights. This is one of the reasons why weight training is a crucial part of losing body fat. So you need to be doing lots of compound and complex movements. So squatting, lunging, deadlifting, pressing, pull-ups, all the good stuff. Resistance training is about time under tension, but also volume. So sets multiplied by reps multiplied by weight, and this is why bar classes don't work, because there's not enough volume. So moving on, I just had to have a short break there. Now we need to be lifting weights. So volume, sets times reps times weight. Now if you look at that equation and you think back to things, other forms of training like yoga or Pilates or whatever, if you look at the equation and the weight part of the equation, you understand now that those modalities of exercise do not contribute enough to this part of the equation to actually be effective in changing your body. So you need to be lifting weight that's relatively heavy, but you also need to be doing lots of sets and reps. So this creates a biochemical response and a calorific response that the metabolic system will respond to. So when the body is under stress lifting weight and it has to repair the damage that is done, because weight training creates damage in the muscle, it creates microtrauma, there is a debt that must be paid back to repair that muscle, and that debt comes in the form of improved sensitivity to glucose and improved sensitivity to nutrition. So you become a repair and restoration machine rather than a storing machine. If you're not exercising, you're going to store a lot more body fat. High intensity interval training, so the lactic acid response that you get when you're doing lactic sessions or aerobic sessions, it burns a lot of calories. It also has, a lasting effect. So when you come in and you do a lactic session and it's 40 on 40 off or whatever the time frames may be, after each effort you should be feeling that out of breath feeling. You should also be feeling very heavy, that lactic acid feeling. And this training creates a response where we burn a lot more calories throughout the rest of the day. And that's what this hormonal effect is on how we burn energy. So once again, we're just doing a modality of training that turns us into a fat burning machine. And it's basically anything hard and fast. So, if you're going to train, short and sharp, hard and fast is far more effective than hours and hours in the gym. You can get everything you need to get done in 45 minutes a day, easily. And if you eat right, you can get away with doing a lot less than that. So lactic acid and the lactic acid system burns more calories per minute than any other form of exercise. And when you're doing lactic sessions or aerobic sessions with us, there's a lot of lactic acid production in both of those. So it's best done as a mix of dynamic movement, resistance training, and all-out efforts. So dynamic movement is things like box jumps, squat jumps, anything that involves a bit of speed. The dumbbell swings or kettlebell swings that we do. Resistance training, so traditional loaded strength exercise, whether it be squats, deadlifts, push-ups, chin-ups, or the all-out efforts being rowing and bike intervals. The calories burned doing this obviously help us with our calorie deficit, but it's also those above mentioned changes to your metabolism that make this very effective. So perceived rate of exertion is a really good way of rating your session, and you could keep a little diary each day you train, and all you do is rate your session on a scale of 1 to 10, 10 being the hardest, and then you times that by the minutes you trained in the session. So if you did a 60-minute session, and it was an 8, you'd come up with 480. This is a really good, simple, easy way to, I suppose, monitor your training and compare day to day, because some days will be harder than others, and it gives you a good way of comparing against your own training. If you're doing a couple of sessions with us and maybe a couple of sessions on your own, this is a good way to make sure that you get that intensity that you need. So bring it all together. We see the overlapping chart here. We have the high intensity interval training, resistance training, cardio, and calories burned, and then combining that with our nutritional elements, so calorie intake and macros. Bringing all this together is the key. You know, you do one part of it, you'll do okay. Do it all and bring it together, marry it up, and you'll do very, very well. The people who do this, it's very obvious, they're the ones that get the rapid and lasting results. And we'd like to see a lot more people achieving that. It pleases us. Nothing pleases us more than seeing people achieve their goals. If you do have questions on anything we've covered today, please comment in the comments below. Feel free to ask any questions and we will give you further info. I hope you've enjoyed this presentation and I hope you got something out of it.